Thank you so much for coming to my capstone. Pretty sure everyone in here knows me, but my name is Carrie OBrien, and I am a PIM 70, D&D, DC&E, CLC capstone, not a mouthful at all, design and delivery, design concepts and evaluation, course link capstone. I guess actually that's kind of redundant, but that's the capstone program that I have designed. The title, Teaching the Teacher, Preparing Future Educators for a Global Classroom Through a Short-Term Study Abroad Experience in Turkey. So, just to kind of give a lay of the land, it's pretty obvious probably, but in case you need to refer, this is the title. Over here I have the International Education Course Link Capstone Requirements. These are all of the items that were in my paper. But for the purposes of today's presentation, this is the agenda that we will be following. So in case you want to just refer to that or know where we are in the presentation, those are the items that I will be addressing today. And just a little warning, I do have quite a few acronyms in my presentation, so I may slip into acronym mode, and just so you know, that's what everything stands for. So. I hope that you will all be engaged and learn something new. And I know it's kind of early in the morning, but there is going to be a test at the end. So I want you all to be prepared. And Karen, I'm blocking off the last 5 minutes after the Q&A for that little activity. So pay attention. Okay, so the agenda, I just went over there, but there it is again. I'll be talking about introduction to background, how I came up with this topic, program rationale, literature review, needs assessment, goals and objectives for the program and the participants, curriculum overview, theoretical foundations, recruitment and admissions, limitations, and conclusions and recommendations. Okay. And can I have a volunteer to please read this slide?
School takes place within a complex socio-cultural ecology and is filtered through cultural screens both students and teachers bring to the classroom.
I love this quote, and I came across it pretty early in my research, and it really kind of informed the rest of the design of my program. I just love that idea, and just kind of that visual of we all come to the classroom knowing certain things. We have certain values and cultural influences, so none of us start with a clean slate. Okay, so the primary program goal of my short-term program to Turkey was to create a meaningful study abroad experience for undergraduate education majors at Keene State College so that they can develop intercultural skills and gain international field experience in order to become culturally and globally aware teachers. So just to kind of give you the overall view. The program scope, just to kind of set that up as well, there's 3 phases to my program. The first is going to take place on campus at Keene State, again for education majors. It will be semester long, 4-credit upper level education course elective for students. It will really set the tone. They'll learn a lot about the Turkish education system, the culture, a little bit of the language, the economy, all facets of Turkish culture, and also build a foundation into intercultural communication theories before they depart for their 16-day field experience in Turkey. At the end of the spring semester, this is actually taking place in 2014 that I've designed it for. So at the end of the Keene State commencement ceremony in May, the students will depart for 16 days where they will take place and they will do a variety of activities. They will stay on campus, mostly at a Turkish university, and partner with education students at that Turkish university. And the main focus of that will be a joint lesson plan that each U.S. student will be paired with a Turkish university student, and they will co-teach a lesson plan in an actual K-12 school in Turkey. And the students from Turkey had volunteered to be part of this. The reentry program is the final phase, and unfortunately that's going to be taking place in the very beginning of the fall 2014 semester due to the fact that students have to return home for the summer after the in-field experience, but I'll talk a lot more about all that later on. So that's the overview of my program. And now let's take a step back. Keene State. Lots of my colleagues have been all over the world for their practicums. I went to the very exotic locale of Keene, New Hampshire, which is 20 minutes down the road, and I was basically a study abroad advisor there. Keene State, the Global Education Office, or GEO, calls it study away, so I may slip into study away, study abroad. It's the same thing essentially, for the purposes of my presentation. So I was an advisor there. I advised students on study abroad experiences. I actually worked in this building every day, and Keene is a quintessential college town. It's a beautiful town. To give you an idea of the school, it's about 5,500 students, undergrads, about 200 graduate students. Most students, because it is a state school, are from the area, from the New England area mostly. It's founded in the liberal arts, has a strong background in education, and may not be too surprising to some of you. I thought it was really interesting in data collected for the 2010-11 academic year, 89% of the student body identified as white non-Hispanic, so very, very non-diverse, I guess, community, which the college is acutely aware of and really trying to hopefully change that, but that is the status right now. And yeah, Keene State. And my little world in the GEO, Global Education Office. So as I mentioned, I was advising students primarily in my internship. I was there for 9 months in this past academic year, 2011-12. I finished up in May and started in August, so it was kind of nice. I got there a little before the students came, and then I stayed a couple weeks after graduation. And mostly I was doing advising, but I did a lot of outreach as well in my internship. Study abroad in the school, because it's a smaller school, they really, really value reaching out to the students and giving them a lot of personal attention, which I really loved and was honestly really impressed with. In the state school, 5,500, they really do value that and try to help the students succeed as much as possible. And about 5 to 10% of the student body studies abroad every year, so higher than the national average, but certainly much lower than a lot of other colleges and universities. So we do a lot of classroom presentations, we do a lot of outreach, we have study away fair twice a year, and those activities I was also involved in. The GEO offers 33 semester abroad programs in 18 different countries. We like to say every continent except Antarctica. And there are no really specific academic discipline programs. So, for example, for education majors, there's not really an opportunity for them to go abroad and specifically take courses in education. They can take one course, a course called Social Context. It's offered at 2 locations, one in England and one in Italy, and that's it. All the other courses they take are going to be electives or something outside of their major. So the theme that I heard over and over when I was advising students was, oh, I'm an education major, I heard it was really hard for us to go abroad, or I heard I might not even be able to go, which was really frustrating from my point of view, trying to get students to be able to go abroad. All right, so Keene State, this is Keene Normal School, it's kind of fuzzy there on the bottom. This picture from the early 1900s, and so Keene was founded in 1909, so it's been around for a little over 100 years, and it really does have, as I mentioned, ties to the education. It actually was a teacher's college way back in the early 1900s when it began, and it has evolved into, I think they offer over 40 disciplines now, but education is still a huge component, and in fact, probably one of the most popular majors, if not the most popular major. In the 2010-11 academic year, they conferred 16% of the graduates received education degrees, which was the highest number of academic degree diplomas that year. So that's a little bit about that. And interestingly enough, the study abroad office at Keene State actually started with a teacher education program. It was meant to be an exchange for students at Keene to go over to England, do their student teaching, and come back. It was the very first program that Keene State offered, and that was in the 1970s, I believe. That is not offered today. I'm not entirely sure what the reason for the dissolution of that program was, but it's kind of ironic that I'm trying to design this program, and it did exist, but no longer does. However, the education department, all the faculty that I talked to, were huge advocates of study abroad and really understood the importance of wanting their students to go abroad. So they try to advise them, to work with their schedules. This is a good time to go, but it is a challenge still. So, challenges for education majors. I'm sure it's not a huge surprise to most of you. No matter what state you're in, education, like other disciplines, engineering, architecture, there's a lot of national and state, local certification requirements that need to be met. Of course, education is a huge one for that. New Hampshire actually has an area of specialty requirement, which basically means that education majors must be double majors. So yes, you're primary education, secondary, special education, but you're also a math major or a French major or a Spanish major, so that you have that area of specialty, which doesn't leave a lot of room in your schedule, surprisingly. NCATE, National Council for the Accreditation of Teacher Education. They are a huge, well-known, renowned organization, and they grant accreditation to the teacher education program at Keene State, and they have their own requirements. So Keene State needs to meet those. Also, the education department, it's difficult to obtain course credit abroad. As I mentioned, there's that one course in England and Italy that students can take. That's really it. Anything else is going to be for their other major or possibly an elective. And then finally, a semester-long program for students to study abroad could potentially, for that reason, delay their graduation. A lot of students that I talked to, if they did go abroad, they either loaded up, took way too many credits either one semester before they went or when they got back. They took summer courses, and some of them even did not graduate on time. So it is really difficult for them. So that sort of informed the entire, idea behind my program design, was how to really develop a program to make it more accessible for education majors without interfering too much with their schedule, delaying graduation, but also how to give them that teaching abroad experience as well. The KSC, Teacher Education Conceptual Framework. This framework basically, is infused throughout the education curriculum. It's on the education website, it's in all of their syllabi. It's everywhere, and they really do kind of infuse that. Students are very aware of it. These are their four frameworks. The first one is to explore the dynamic nature of the teaching and learning process. The second, demonstrate professional and ethical behaviors that meet high expectations and standards. The third, understand the world from multiple perspectives. And four, contribute to a just and equitable world. And I've highlighted these last 2, 3, and 4 in a different color because those are really the ones I'm focusing on for the purposes of my program design. So, literature review. So there are tons of studies done. Teacher education, study abroad for teachers. There is a plethora of information out there. This is certainly not groundbreaking. I am not the first one to think about this. Especially in the last 10, 20 years, it's just exponentially the number of articles and research and studies out there that have been done. And it's really interesting because a lot of schools do this really successfully already. They've either figured out how to offer teach abroad programs for an entire semester for their students, or they have what I've sort of termed a hybrid model, where students can fulfill 10 weeks of their teaching in their host country or their host state. So for example, it would be New Hampshire for Keene State. So they do 10 weeks of student teaching in New Hampshire, and then they can do the remaining of the semester abroad to fulfill the state requirements. Or they do some kind of a short-term model. So the positive outcomes that have come out of a lot of these studies, one, among participants are increased self-awareness and self-confidence, a broadened global perspective, increased professional commitment, enhanced instructional flexibility, empathy for diverse learners, and finally, impact on the way they will teach in their future classrooms. And I think the last one is really kind of the combination of all of these things. And the enhanced, most of these I think are pretty obvious, but the enhanced instructional flexibility, I just want to mention, a lot of teachers in these studies were in developing countries or maybe in school systems that just didn't have a lot of resources. So they may have had to go and buy paper for their classes, or they may have students coming in who don't even have pens or pencils with them. And while all of the teachers that were interviewed in these studies obviously felt really stressed and challenged by this, they all did acknowledge that they felt so much more capable and creative in their own classrooms in the US. So they just felt, if I could do that, I can certainly become more creative. It's really helped me to be a lot more creative in my own classroom landing back in the US. All right, so why short term? It allows for flexibility with student schedules. As I said, a semester program might not allow some students to go, and the short-term program fits in a little better with education majors. Secondly, my program is embedded in a semester-long program on campus that allows for intentional preparation before departure. So I think we would all agree, if you're in a country for a longer period of time, it's obviously more valuable. You get the language acquisition, you get more exposure to the culture, you're more involved in the culture, and that's really the downfall of short-term programs. However, by sort of preparing students a semester before they go on this program, I'm hoping to sort of offset that somewhat. It also keeps costs down, hopefully, if they're there for a shorter period of time, increasing accessibility for education majors who may not otherwise be able to go or afford it. And then finally, easier to work within an international public school system. And that's, some studies, a lot of schools that do offer teach abroad in countries all over the world, you know, if it's a Spanish-speaking country, it's more common. This is a broad generalization, but I think a lot of US students may have Spanish-speaking ability, but if we're sending students to Russia or China, there may be fewer students that will be able to go teach abroad because they don't have the language requirements. So when they go to those countries, they're either in private schools that are teaching English, or the language of instruction at that school is English, or they're on military bases and they're teaching children of military families that are stationed abroad. So, I mean, certainly while those programs are valuable, I don't think that's quite the same cultural immersion that you could get from working within a public school system in the country. And I think for a semester program, there's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy you'd have to go through, but for a short-term program, it's much easier to do. Why Turkey? And I apologize, my peer advisor did a wonderful job in telling me that my map was blurry, and I must have put about 10 up here, and they were all blurry. So this is about as good as it gets. But this is Turkey. Way up here is Istanbul, kind of in the northwest corner. This is the Bosphorus Strait, and this is the Black Sea up here. Cyprus, Greece, Western Europe, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Georgia, Russia, and yeah, Black Sea I already mentioned. So Turkey is about the size of Texas, about 75 million people. Istanbul is the largest city with 19 million. Ankara is that capital. And I think it's a fascinating region for so many reasons, but it's a land of paradoxes, really. It's sort of Eastern and Western, modern and traditional, you know, secular and deeply religious. So it is a secular country, but over 99% of the population identifies as Muslim. It literally does sort of sit within the European continent and the Asian continent, so there's that influx of influence there as well. And Istanbul is certainly an extremely modern, bustling city, but it is also very traditional. If you walk in through certain neighborhoods or you hear the call to prayer 5 times a day, you definitely realize, I'm in a big city, but this is not the US. So I think that it really has the potential to be somewhat familiar, but also foreign to US visitors. And I think that's especially important for Keene State students because I wanted to challenge them. I wanted to specifically choose a location that was non-native English speaking, but I didn't want to completely freak them out and do, you know, complete culture shock. So I think Turkey, and also being a short-term program, is sort of a nice balance of, you know, somewhat challenging, but not completely putting them into the deep end. And really the main reason I went, or the reason I chose Turkey was because I did a study abroad program there last year with Linda, our professor here. At S.I.T, we did a short-term intercultural communication field course, and it was 10 days, so really, really short. We were mostly in Istanbul, and we did go down to Bursa for a little bit So in those 10 days, we had homestays, we were in urban environments, rural environments, we visited a local university, we took courses there, had lectures, went around, saw a lot of the cultural sites, and it really was, I mean, for a 10-day program, it opened up my eyes to a land that I really, admittedly, I knew nothing about. The people are amazing, the traditions, the culture, and so at least I feel like I can sort of know what I'm talking about in designing a program in Turkey. And also, I think it's important to note that according to the 2011 Open Doors Report, there is a U.S. Department of State sponsored initiative to increase the number of Americans studying abroad in non-traditional locations. They refer to Turkey as non-traditional. Turkey is one of the 5 countries that they're focused on. And I also, by the way, Turkey sends more students to the U.S. than any other country in Europe, which I was actually kind of surprised about. So, Boğaziçi University. I'm going to just apologize for my Turkish accent right off the bat, because I'm sure that's not accurate. Boğaziçi basically means Bosphorus, and this is the Bosphorus right here, and the bridge, and over here we have the campus at Bosphorus University, or Boğaziçi. It is a public university located along the European side of the Bosphorus. The language of instruction is English, which obviously is a huge key factor. So all the teachers, all the classes, all the students will speak English in their classes. And the compatibility of the mission and values, available resources, and the unique cultural background of Boğaziçi really made it a good fit for this program design. And what I mean by unique cultural background is that Boğaziçi actually began as the first American university abroad, but it did become part of the Turkish university system in 1971, and it is today one of the most prestigious universities in all of Turkey. Also the student body, it's about 8,000 undergrads, 10,000 students total, which is about double the size of KEED, but still not a huge, massive university, and I thought that would be kind of a nice fit as well. So needs assessment. I didn't do a formal needs assessment. I'll talk a little bit about that and my limitations. But basically, I'm recommending the use of surveys, interviews, and focus groups with key stakeholders. Key stakeholders being Keene State education majors, obviously the education department, partners and partnership organizations in Turkey, such as BU, in order to kind of assess what their thoughts would be on such a program. This program, in the informal interviews that I did do a number, probably about 20. I talked with a number of people at Keene, education faculty, other faculty in other departments, students, and based on this, there's definitely interest in a program like this, especially in Turkey. And in fact, the really great thing as I was doing my interviews is that people would give me information and pass it along, so I realized that we actually had some faculty with ties to Turkey, and there's an economics professor at Keene State, actually, who's a Turkish native. So she agreed to talk with me as well and was very excited and open to, giving her input and advice, and potentially, maybe co-leading the program or leading the program, as well as offering students in the class maybe a little introduction to the Turkish language. So that was really exciting. And also this course potentially fills a gap, not just in the education curriculum, but also in the communication curriculum, obviously with the intercultural component. And Keene State does offer an intercultural communication class, but it's a 300 level course, which seems kind of, it's disappointing because students need to have certain prerequisites to be able to take that class. And I would argue that intercultural communication is a pretty core skill that a lot of students should have. So it could hopefully maybe make it a little more accessible to students who otherwise wouldn't have the number of prerequisites for it. All right. So, can I have someone please read the slide? Sam.
According to the 2011 Open Doors Report, the number of Americans studying abroad increased 88% in the last decade. Yet while students pursuing degrees in the social sciences or business and management accounted for the greatest number of students studying abroad in 2009-2010, approximately 20% in each category, education majors made up only 4.1% of this total.
Surprising. I was surprised by that. Does anyone want to take a guess? There are 3 disciplines with lower numbers of students studying abroad. 1.5, and agriculture is 1.3. So I thought that was really
Well, it'd be interesting to know of that 4.1%, how many of those students were actually taking education courses or were simply education majors.
right.
The open doors figures never tell us that, but that, I think if everything you said before is true, only some small portion of the 4.1 were doing education courses while they were studying.
Right, yeah, exactly. If you parse that out even more. Yeah, so that's a pretty shocking number, I think. So why student teach abroad? I think a lot of us, a lot of people may assume, well, future teachers or pre-service teachers, as they're sometimes called, they're going to be going into U.S. classrooms, most likely. Why do they need to go abroad? They're going to be in U.S. classrooms, they should have training in U.S. classrooms. And I would agree with that on some level. However, the student teaching experience is a strong determinant in the development of a teacher's attitudes and behaviors. Kelleher has cited that. And the problem or the issue with domestic placements is that in U.S. schools, students are already located within their dominant culture. Most students, they implicitly understand and they do not question. I don't know why I use the analogy of being on the beach. If you're swimming in the water and you can't really see the water, it kind of takes you to be standing on the sand along the edge to be able to see it a lot more clearly. And I think students may not be challenged as much. They're in their comfort zone. They may not be aware of certain things if they're doing all of their student teaching in U.S. classrooms. Student teaching abroad prepares future teachers to work with diverse learners. And it exposes future teachers' beliefs in order to clearly and articulately justify new behaviors, actions, and teaching. Again, from Kelleher, and that goes back to my beach analogy. Okay, pop quiz. We're about halfway through, so hopefully everybody's still hanging in okay. Got your coffee this morning. So, pop quiz. I'm going to throw some questions on the board, and we're a small enough group. I'm not going to be too formal about this. If you want to just shout out the answer or raise your hand, either way, go for it. Number 1, if I can get this to work. Percent of all public elementary and secondary teachers in the U.S. designated as white Caucasian. Anyone want to take a number, percent guess as to?
72.
72?
90.
90? 89? Who said 90?
Me. Oh, gold star.
Percent of students enrolled in K-12 schools in the U.S. who represent a minority population.
90.
90.
Popular answer.
Anyone else? 41. And finally, percent of students who have at least one parent who is foreign born.
35.
23. So I just thought that was interesting, and by the way, I do have the source here. This was all from the U.S. Census Bureau in 2006, so these figures are already 6 years old, which I think is pretty shocking. I didn't know the numbers would be that high. So. Well, it was cited in Divalar and Jiang in 2009, but they referred to it from 2006. Sorry about that. All right. So, NCATE, which I mentioned before, the Accrediting Institution for Keene State's Teacher Education Program, they have a set of standards and requirements that all teacher education programs must fill, and hundreds of colleges and universities around the U.S. are accredited by NCATE, so Keene State is no exception. It's very renowned. They have this standard for diversity, which states or stipulates that teacher education programs demonstrate that teacher candidates have engaged in experiences with diverse student populations and that they can apply proficiencies related to diversity. Though many teacher education programs, including Keene State, have a diversity component, 39 U.S. states, including New Hampshire, have no specific certification requirements related to multicultural education for teachers. So I just think it's really interesting that this is a great plan, this is a great idea, but how are we measuring this and how are we ensuring that this is achieved? There really is not a model for it right now, and I think a lot of schools do it in their own way. Keene State offers a course called Social Context, and that does teach a lot of multiculturalism in the classroom and social justice issues, but again, it's in the U.S. classroom at the university. So, primary program goal. This is not a mistake, I put this in here twice. Now that we're getting into the curriculum, I wanted to just revisit this. So again, the primary program goal for my program is to create a meaningful study abroad experience for undergrad education majors so that they can develop intercultural skills and gain international field experience in order to become culturally and globally aware. Teaching the teacher goals and objectives. Can I have someone volunteer to read the first two bullets?
Provide an introduction to the idea of culture, global awareness, and supporting theoretical frameworks. Introduce Turkey from a cultural, historical, political, and economic lens, and introduce the Turkish education system.
And someone to read the last three?
Expose participants to various excursions and cultural activities around Istanbul. Oh, sorry. Through a partnership with the EU, provide a cultural and professional educational opportunity for U.S. and Turkish participants to work together in a classroom environment and allow KSC participants to gain valuable field experience in a classroom setting abroad. And expose participants to various excursions and cultural activities around Istanbul.
And last one. Provide a reentry program in the fall in which participants will reflect upon and discuss their experiences in Turkey and how they will use what they learned in their future classrooms. And I will talk a little bit about that. Now for the participants, for the actual students, the education majors at Keene State, goals and objectives include gaining a deeper awareness and knowledge of their own culture and identity and being able to apply that understanding in working with others from a different cultural background, understanding various intercultural communication theories and be able to apply them to Turkish culture, understand and appreciate multiple perspectives and recognize stereotypes, and increase self-confidence and independence through structured and unstructured activities. All right, so the curriculum. Teaching the teacher will prepare students to thoughtfully engage with the host culture before departing for Turkey. That's the on-campus phase. Encourage guided reflection and direct experience in country while they're in Istanbul for 16 days. And synthesize reflection and experience and application for future learning during re-entry. And again, this will follow a semester of coursework on campus in the spring semester. The class will provide a basic overview of Turkey, educational foundations, intercultural communication theory, and Kolb. You can't get away from him. David Kolb, you know him, you love him. I think most of us here are very familiar with his model, but just to sort of review that he has a learning model here that most of us learn in this cycle. It may not be exactly in this order, but we are constantly learning and moving through phases, and it's sort of a spiral effect that each time you go through one and you're taking that learning with you each time. And this really was a big influence in the design of my program. So for example, in the concrete experience is when my students are actually in Turkey, they're having that experience, they're seeing the synthesis of that theoretical background that they got on campus before they left. Reflective observation is going to be throughout the entire course. They're going to have a lot of journal entry writing, video logs, reflection time. There's going to be debriefs at the end almost of every day in my 16-day itinerary. Some in the morning, some at night. It'll be a group session led by the faculty leader. There will be an individual check-in with participants and the faculty leader about halfway through the course. And the faculty leader will be there to kind of guide them and help them, but also make sure that they're being challenged and they're pushing themselves as well. The abstract conceptualization is really more the foundations in the on-semester course, where they're learning the theories, they're learning about Turkey. And active experimentation is when they get to put that together, especially in the paired project that they have with the Turkish university students. They're trying out the theories that they've learned because now they are in this situation where they're working in pairs with people from another country who do not speak the same language, from their native standpoint. Even though they're speaking in English, it's a little different than what they're probably used to. In concrete experience, again, when students return home to the U.S. and they have the reentry session, I'll talk a little bit about this later, but the students will then begin their student teaching in U.S. schools. So they will get to apply their cultural learning in their U.S. schools student teaching environment in the U.S. when they get back. Okay, Bennett. He's made a few appearances at Capstone this week. So he has a development model of intercultural sensitivity and I won't really, I'm not going to beat this into the ground too much, but basically just another model to sort of measure intercultural development or progress along the way. So there's 6 stages. It may not be entirely linear, but you've got the ethnocentric all the way over here, denial, defense, minimization, which are really ways to sort of ignore, to deny cultural differences. And then way over here, you've got the ethno-relative, the acceptance, adaptation, integration, which is really a way of seeking cultural differences. So that's kind of your movement along the path there. And this model will be used in the syllabus for the course I've designed, and students will learn a lot about theory and learn how to sort of track their own progress and just become aware of the stage that they're currently in and how that changes over the course. Challenge and support. So this is also a theory. I've seen this particular challenge and support phrase. I've seen it tied to transformative learning. I've seen it tied to Bennett's model, but I'm citing Vandenberg, Page, and Liu, and they offer challenge and support. So I just love this cartoon. I thought that was cute. So you're out of water. You're really, you're struggling, and it's just the idea that if students are put in a situation where they're thrown way into the deep end,